ShadowKiss, Chapter 4. It began. At first, things were not too different from any other day. Dampiers and Murray attended separate classes in the first half of the school day, then joined up after lunch. Kristen had most of the same afternoon classes I could had last semester, so it was almost like following my own schedule again. The difference was that I was no longer a student in these classes. I don't sit at a desk or have to do any of the work. I was also a lot more uncomfortable since I had to stand at the back of the room the entire time, along with other known voices who were guarding Morai. Outside the school, this was what it usually looked like. Morai came first. Guardians were shadows. There was a strong temptation to talk to our fellow non-voices, particularly during the times when the Morai were working on their own and talking among us themselves. None of us cracked though. The pressure and the adrenaline of the first day had us all on good behavior. After biology, Eid and I started using a bodyguard technique called a pair guarding. I was near guard and worked with Lisa and Christian for immediate defense. Eid, being far guard, walked further away and scanned the larger area for any potential threats. We followed this pattern for the rest of the day up until the last class came around. Lisa gave Christian a quick kiss on the cheek, and I realized they were parting. You guys don't have the same schedule in this time? I asked with dismay, stepping over to the side of the hall to stay out of the student traffic. Eid had already detected that we were parting and had stopped far guard duties to come talk to us. I don't know how Lisa and Christian schedules lined up for this new semester. Lisa took in my disappointment look and gave me a sympathetic smile. Sorry, we are going to study together after school, but right now I have got to go to creative writing. And I, declared Christian loftily, have to go to the culinary science. Culinary science? I cried. You elected culinary science? That is like the most brainless class ever. It is not, he countered. And even if it was, well, hey, you just smiled last semester, right? I groaned. Come on, Rose, laughed Eliza. It is just one class period. It won't be that. She was cut off when a commotion broke out further down the hall. We and everyone near us stopped and started. One of my guardian instructors, Emil, had practically appeared out of nowhere and playing Strigoi. Reached for a motorcycle, he swung her away, pressing her to his chest and exposing her neck as though he could bite her. I could not see who she was, just a tangle of brown hair. But her assigned protector was Shan Reyes. The attack had caught him by surprise. It was the first one of the day, but he fumbled only a little as he kicked Emily to the side and wrested the girl away. The two guys squared off, and everyone watched eagerly. A few even whistled and shouted, cheering Shane on. One of the catcallers was Rayan Alsworth. He was so fixated on watching the fight, which Shane, wielding his stake, had just about won, that he don't notice two other adult guardians sneaking up on him and Camille. Heath and I realized it at the same time and stiffened instincts, readying both of us to spring forward. Stay with them, Heath told me. He headed towards Ryan and Camille, who had just discovered they were being set upon. Ryan didn't react as well as Shan had, particularly since he faced two attackers. One of the guardians distracted Ryan while the other, Drimmit Arnosa, grabbed Camille. She screamed, not faking her fear. She apparently don't find being in Drimit's arms as thrilling as I did. Eid headed towards them, approaching from behind, and landed a blow on the side of Drimit's head. It hardly faced Drummond, but it was still amazed. I was still amazed. I could barely even been able to land a hit on him in all our trainings. Eats attack forced Drummond to release Camille and face his new threat. He spun around, graceful as a dancer, and advanced on Eat. Meanwhile, Shane had stacked his trigger and jumped in to help Eat. Moving around to Drummond's other side, I watched. Fists clenched in excitement, intrigued with the fighting in general. and with watching Drummond in particular. It amazed me that someone so deadly could be so beautiful. I wish I was a part of the fray, but no, I had to watch the area around me in case any strigoi attacked her. But they don't. Shane and Eid successfully finished off Drummond. Part of me was a little sad at this. I wanted Drummond to be good at everything. However, Ryan had tried to help and failed. Drummond had technically killed him. So I felt a twisted comfort in thinking that Drummond had still been a badass Strigoi. He and Emil praised Shane for being fast on his feet and Eid for realizing he had to treat this as a group invader rather than one on one trials. I got a note for watching Eid back, and Rayon was chastised for not paying attention to his moroi. Eve and I grinned at each other, happy over getting high marks on the first test. I could not have minded a slightly bigger role, but this was not a bad start to the field experience. We high fived, and I saw Drummond shake his head at us as he left. With the drama over, our foursome split up. Lisa gave me one last smile over her shoulder and spoke to me through the bond. Have fun in culinary clans. I rolled my eyes, but she and Eid had already rounded a corner. Culinary sciences sounded pretty impressive, but really it was just a fancy term for what was essentially a cooking class. Despite my teasing Christian about it being brainless, I had some respect for it. I could barely boil water after all. Still, it was a lot different from the elective like creative writing or debate, and I had no doubts Christian was taking it as a blow off class and not because he wanted to be a chef someday. At least I might get some satisfaction out of watching him mix a cake or something. Maybe he could even wear an apron. There were three other known voices in the class who were gardening Murray. Since the culinary science room was large and open with lots of windows, the four of us worked together to come up with a plan to pool our efforts and secure the whole room. When I could watch the non-voice do their field experience in past years, I could only ever paid attention to the fights. I could never notice the teamwork and strategies that must have been going on. Theoretically, the four of us were here to only protect our assigned morai, but we could slip into a role where we were protecting the whole class. My post was by a fire door that lead outside the school. Coincidentally, it was right by the station Christian was working at. The class normally cooked in pairs, but there was an odd number of students. Rather than work in a group of three, Christian had volunteered to be by himself. No one had seems to mind. Many still regarded him and his family with the same prejudge that Jess did. To my disappointment, Christian was not baking a cake. What is that? I asked, watching him take out a bowl of some kind of raw ground up meat from the refrigerator. Meat, he said, dumping it into the cutting board. I know that, you idiot. What kind? Ground beef. He pulled another container out and then another. And this is veal. And this is pork. Do you have a T-Rex that you're going to feed? Only if you want some. This is for Medalov. I started. What? Three kinds of meats? Why eat something called a Medalov if you're not actually going to get some meat out of it? I shook my head. I cannot believe this is only the first day with you. He glanced down, focusing on kneading his tree meat creation together. You sure making a big deal out of this. Do you really hate me that much? I heard you were screaming at the top of your lungs back in the gym. No, I was not. And I don't hate you at all. I admitted. You're just taking it out on me because you don't get back with Lisa. I don't answer. He was not that far off. He continued. I might actually be a good idea for you to practice with someone different. I know that is what Drummond says too. Christian put the meat into a bowl and started adding some other ingredients. Then why question it? Black knows what he is doing. I could trust anything with he says. It sucks that they are going to lose him after we graduate, but I could rather see him with Lisa. Me too. He passed and looked up, meeting my eyes. We both smiled, amused at how shocked we were to have agreed with each other. A moment later, he returned to his work. You are good too, not too grudging, he said. The way you handled yourself. He don't finish the though, but I know what he was talking about. Spokane. Preston had not been around when I killed the Strigoi, but he could be instrumental in helping with the escape. He and I had teamed up, using his fire magic as a means of letting me substitute our captors. We could work well together, all of our animosity put aside. I guess you and I have better things to do than fight all the time. I mused, like worry about Victor Day's work trial. I realized for a moment I considered telling Christian what I could learn. He could been around the night it had all gone down with Victor last fall, but I decided not to mention the news just yet. Lisa needed to hear it first. Yeah, Christian said, unaware of my thoughts. Brace yourself, but we are not that afraid. I mean, I'm smarter and a lot funnier, but at the end of the day, we both want to keep her safe. I hesitated. You know, I'm not going to take her away from you. I cannot. No one can. Not as long as you guys have that bond. I was surprised he could brought this up. I honestly suspected that there were two reasons he and I argued a lot. One was that he both and had personalities that liked to argue. The other reason, the big one, was that we were each envious of the other's relationship with Lisa. But as he said, we really had the same motives. We cared about her. And don't think the bond will keep you guys apart, I said. I know the link bothered him. How could you ever get romantically close to someone when they had that kind of connection with the other person, even if that other person was just a friend? She cares about you. I could not bring myself to say loves. She has a whole separate place for you in her heart. Christian put his dish in the oven. He did not just say that. I have a feeling we are on the verge of hugging and coming up with our cute nicknames for each other. He was trying to look disgusted at my sentiment, but I could tell he was liked being told that Lisa cared about him. I already have a nickname for you, but I will get in trouble if I say it in a class. Ah, he said happily. That is the ruse, I knew. He went off to talk to another friend while his meatloaf cooked, which was probably just as well. My door was a vulnerable position, and I should not have been chatting away. Even if the rest of the class was across the room, I saw Jess and Rolf working together. Like Christian, they could choose a blow of class too. No attacks occurred, but a guardian named Dustin did come to make notes on us non-voice. We were held our position. He was standing near me right when Jess chose to stop by. At first, I thought it was a coincidence until Jess spoke. I take back what I said earlier, Jess. I figured it out. You're not upset because of laser question. You're upset because the rules say you have to be with a student. And Adrian Ashwok too old. The way I hear it, you guys have already had a lot of practice watching each other bodies. That joke could have been so much funnier, but I could learn not to expect too much from Jess. I know for a fact that he don't care about Adrian and me. I also suspected he don't even believe we had anything going on, but Jess was still bitter about me threatening him earlier, and here was his chance to get back at me. Dustin, standing within earshot, has no interest in Jess' idiotic teasing. Dustin could probably have an interest, however, if I slammed Jess' face into the wall. That don't mean I had to be silent though. Guardians talk to Morai all the time. They just tend to be respectful and still keep an eye on their surroundings. So I gave just a small smile and simply said, your wit is always such a delight, Mr. Zalox. I can barely contain myself around it. I then turned away and survived the rest of the room. When just realized I was not going to do anything else, he laughed and walked away, apparently thinking he could win some great victory. Dustin left shortly thereafter. Asshole, muttered Christian, returning to his station. Class had about 5 minutes to left. My eyes followed just across the room. You know something, Christian? I'm pretty happy to be guarding you. If you're comparing me to Zillows, I don't really take that as much of a compliment. But here, try this. Then you will really be glad you're with me. His masterpiece was finished and he gave me a piece. I had not realized it, but just before the meatloaf had gone in, he could wrap it in a bacon. Good God, I said, this is the most stereotypical vampire food ever. Only if it was raw. What do you think? It's good, I said reluctantly. Who knew the bacon could make all differences? Really good. I think you have a promising future as a housewife while Lisa works and makes millions of dollars. Funny, that is exactly my dream. We left the class in the light moods. Things had grown mood friendly between us, and I decided that I could handle the next 6 weeks protecting him. He and Lisa were going to meet in the library to study or pretend to study, but he had to stop by his dorm first. So I followed him across the quad, back into the winter air that had grown chillier since sunset 7 hours ago. The snow on the paths, which had turned slush in the sun, had now frozen up and made walking treacherous. Along the way, we were joined by Braudon Laser and Amorai, who lived in Christian's Hall. Braudon could barely contain himself, recapping a fight he could witness in his max class. We listened to his redemption, all of us laughing at the thought of Albatross sneaking in through the window. Hey, she might be old, but she could take on almost any of us. I told them. I gave Branson a puzzled look. He had bruises and red spotches on his face. He also had a few weird welts near his ear. What happened to you? Have you been fighting guardians too? His smile promptly disappeared and he looked away from me. Nah, just well. Come on, I said. Mora might not trying to fight like Dampier did, but they got in brawls with each other just as often as anyone else. I tried to think of any Mora he might have a conflict with. For the most part, Bradon was pretty likable. That is the lamest, most unlogical excuse in the world. It is true, he said, still avoiding my eyes. If someone's screwing with you, I can give you a few pointers. He turned back to me, looking eyes. Just let it go. He was not hostile or anything, but there was a firm note in his voice. It was almost like he believed saying the words alone could make me obey him. I chuckled. What are you trying to do? Compel me? Suddenly, I saw movement on my left, a slight shadow bending with the dark shapes of a cluster of snowy pine trees, but moving just enough to catch my attention. Stan's face emerged from the darkness as he sprang towards us. Finally, my first test. Adrenaline shot through me just as strong as if a real strigoi were approaching. I reacted instantly, reaching out to grab both Braden and Christian. That was always the first move to throw my own life before theirs. I jerked the two guys to a halt and turned towards my attacker, reaching for my stake in order to defend the Morai. And that is when he appeared. Manson. He stood several feet in front of me, off to Stan's right, looking just as he had last night. Transparent, shimmering, sad. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I froze, unable to move or finish going for my streak. I forget about what I could have been doing and completely lost track of people and commission around. The world slowed down, everything faded around me. There was only Manson, that ghostly shimmering Manson, who glowed in the dark and seemed like he so badly wanted to tell me something. The same feeling of helplessness I experienced in Spokane returned to me. I had not been able to help him then. I could not help him now. My stomach turned cold and hollow. I could do nothing except stand there, wondering what he was trying to say. He lifted one transparent hand and pointed off towards the other side of the campus, but I don't know what it meant. There was so much over there, and it was not clear what he was pointing at. I shook my head, not understanding, but despite wishing I could, the sorrow on his face seems to grow. Suddenly, something slammed into my shoulder, and I stumbled forward. The world suddenly started up again, snapping me out of the dreamy state I could just been in. I only barely managed to throw out my hands in time to stop myself from hitting the ground. I looked up and saw Stan standing over me. Hathaway, he barked. What are you doing? I blinked, still trying to shake off the weirdness of seeing Manson again. I felt slush and dashed. I looked into Stan's angry face and then glanced over at where Manson had been. He was gone. I turned my attention back to Stan and realized what had happened. In my distraction, I could completely spaced while he could strike his attack. He now had one arm around Christian neck and one around Banson. He was not hurting them, but this point was made. If I had been a stray god, he growled, these two could be dead.